just because there's always a steady stream of newer people coming into the channel and stuff, right? And of course, like a lot of the basic knowledge stuff, I guess you can say, like the beginner knowledge stuff. You know, like on my channel, anyways. I cover some of the stuff like, you know, like a year or 2 years ago or whatever it is, and then we just kind of leave it and forget about it. And they're kind of older videos. But with the newer people in the channel, I thought, you know, probably good to just small refresher on some of the basics and stuff. So I just want to do a quick little thing on FSM communication, I guess you could say. So I'm just going to take this camera actually, and I'm going to take them up, and not by the rotation, I meant by position, and I'm going to rotate them down like that, right? I might even make them at orthographic, right? So we get that. Of course, now we have to adjust this. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we're not gonna set this up very perfect. It's gonna be off. You know, but that's okay. I'm not that worried about it. So, communication wise, let's just build a little player. I'm gonna use a cube. There we go. He'll be our player. Let's scale him up a bit. So here's actually another quick tip. So I'm playing with the scale. It's not a good idea to play with a scale on the root of an object. Like this is the graphics. Like you would be tempted to make this your player, like this object. Place your, like, don't do that. It's going to cause you issues, right? I'm going to place another object, an empty object that doesn't have a messed up scale, right? They're ones, and this guy is going to be my graphic, and he can have all the screwed up scale he wants. That's fine, because now the player can sit, you know, wherever, and it's a scale of 1. Now I'm actually going to adjust this anchor point. I'm going to move this up half of its height so the anchor is sitting at the bottom. And I'm going to maintain this guy's collider there. It'll just help make things, I guess, interesting. And you know what? Let's go with a character controller. I was going to go physics, but I think a character controller is kind of more of a simple. So let's get rid of this controller. We don't need that. We'll have him for the graphics. All right. So let's make sure our character controllers, you know, roughly the same size. It ain't got to be perfect. All right. We'll elevate them up a little bit. So there, now we have our little character controller, and we'll give him an FSM. Now we're going to have a top-down view, and I'm going to give this guy a tag of player, and I could even put layers here. Like I can say he's a layer player as well, right? That'll help with some of the communicational stuff. So in here, if I have let's say get axis vector, I'm not going to go relative to anything because it's going to be top down. So when I push forward, he's going to move up on the map. So it's just a basic up. Now if I wanted to be relative, if I push forward and he's going forward to that, I could do relative to, you know, himself or to a camera or whatever. But I'm just going to go basic up and down. And then all I'm going to do is just do a simple move. So real simple. There's really not much for the controller here, right? Give him a little more speed, and as you can see now, he'll move. Right. So holding down forward, and he goes that way. You know, right down. Perfect. So I'll speed him up a little bit. He's a little slow there. And then the other thing I want to do is I'm going to do a smooth look at direction. And I want this thing to look at the same direction I'm moving. Right? And I can even probably speed him up a little bit on that. And to help us see that direction, I'm going to actually put a cylinder. And the cylinder is going to come up and it's going to rotate 90 because the forward facing. If we look at this, we're on the Z. That's the forward facing direction there. So let's take that. Let's rotate him back this way. Scale him that way. And just sink him down a bit. So he's kind of looking like a tank. All right, so now, yeah, so we have this object I can just kind of move around. Cool, cool. So, with that said, let's build. So let's name these FSMs. Let's call this one move. Let's make another one called health. And in our health, let's develop some methods. What can the health do? We can take damage. Let's make an event for that. And we can heal. We'll make an event for that. Both those will be global. Right? So we have damage, we have heal. Pretty basic. Now, there's a nice action called event properties. Now, if you don't have event properties, it's part of the ecosystem. So if you don't have the ecosystem, get the ecosystem, right? Under add-ons. The original place for it, you go to the welcome screen, you can go onto the add-ons, it takes you to the web page, you can download the ecosystem. When you install the ecosystem, you get this nice little browser here, and we can look for stuff. And there's a nice one called Array Maker. Array Marker? No, Array Maker. It is a whole bunch of actions, but there's a package called Array Maker, and this get, set, and event properties is in that package. So let's do, I'm just going to use the key called value. It doesn't mean anything yet because we haven't told it that it means anything yet. And I'm going to give it a variable called value. Okay. And we're going to int add. So we're going to need another variable for our health to represent our health. So let's add a variable called health, and we're going to add value to it. Now, we don't want to just keep adding value constantly. We're going to want to clamp it. So let's clamp this value. Okay, and we'll say 5, 0 to 5. Now that we have that. That's pretty much all we really need in the heal. We could play some effects, play some sounds. Not too worried about that right now. Under the damage, I'm going to use that same thing. I'm going to use the get event properties, and we'll even use value. I'm going to just reuse that variable. And this time, we're going to int subtract our health by the value. And then I'm going to int compare. We need to make sure that these things are in order. Order is very, very critical. So health, if it is equal to 0, we'll use is dead. If it's less than 0, we'll use is dead. I'm not even going to bother using the is greater right now. We don't really need it. So if we hit here, we could say, you know, it's game over, or whatever the case is. In this case, maybe I'll just destroy the object. All right, so now we have our little basic health system, right? So what about, say, a health pickup? Let's do that. That's a great way to start our communication. Let's make an object, call it health pickup, and you know what, I'm going to give it a let's do 2 spheres. Why? Just because I said so. How about that? Right? So health is there. So we're going to take 1 sphere. We'll move them up. This sphere, we'll move them up. We got 3rd sphere. Move them down. We have somewhat of a heart, I guess. And let's paint these. Let's go red. All right. I'm just for simplicity, I'm actually going to make another empty and put all these graphics under that. And then the anchor point. This is going to be important. I want the graphics to be above that anchor point. Actually, a little ways above that anchor point, right? Like floating kind of idea. And then I'm actually going to add a FSM on this. We're just going to do a rotate. And I'm going to have it rotate per second, every frame, self, and we'll give it like a Z, like that. Right? And that'll give us an effect. Like that. Okay, cool. I mean, at that distance, we're not really going to see it unless I scale that up, maybe. Maybe like that. So, of course, now this anchor point needs to change. So now let's add a trigger. Let's add a, you use any collider. Maybe I'll do a sphere collider. And let's expand it out. Somewhat match the area. I'm not going to have to go perfect for that. I mean, obviously, you definitely could. I'm going to mark it as trigger. Right, so now it's an area. It's not a collider, it's an area. In fact, these ones don't even need a collider. I'm going to get rid of those. And then let's, here, this particular guy, let's add a trigger event. And this trigger event is going to happen on enter. When something hits this, when something enters this, and we want to filter that by tag, player, right? So when an object with this tag enters that trigger, we can set an event. Okay, we'll say collect. Store the collider. So that's a really important part for this communication. That is the reference you need for something that you're interacting with, right? So I'm just going to call it object. So we know we have collected something. We're going to come over here. Now, what do we want to do now that this event has fired? We've gone over here and we have this data now, right? We want to set event properties because we know we're using that in the other one. I know in the other one we have a health FSM. Let's just take a look at that. It's named health. It has an event called heal. And it could, in the property, we can have an integer called a value. Okay. Right. So we have an integer called value. Right. So let's add 2. Right. And send event. We want to send the event to a game object's FSM. So not the owner. But we're going to specify the object. We're going to specify the object that we have collided with in our trigger. We've collided with something. That's what we want to talk to. We know the FSM name is health, and we know the event is called heal. Okay. Now, if you want a shortcut on filling that part out, if I temporarily deactivate that, right, and let's just clear these out, right, so it's blank. If I drag the object that I'm planning on hitting and put it there, don't keep it like that, because once you prefab this, you're gonna lose your references, right? But this will allow me to autofill, right? And if I click the dots now, I can see the FSMs. I know it's health. If I click on that, it'll show me the two events. I know I'm using heal. It's now autofilled. Now that it's autofilled, I'm changing it over back to the object, right? So now, how should we handle this? Should we destroy this object? Possibly, right? What if we we're going to do something special just to help add the communicational part? Here, let's go like this. I'm going to make an empty object, and this is going to be the health manager. And you know what? He is going to have an array proxy. Health pickups. Okay, and we're going to give him an FSM. So if I want things to talk to this manager, they need this reference, but this manager is just data. He doesn't really exist in the world. Like, well, I guess he does. He's got to transform, but he doesn't have a collider. He's not going around. We're not hitting him. We're not going to have that reference. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go do a get owner. So that's getting the owner game object of this object, and I'm going to store it as a global variable, health manager. There we go. Now we have the health manager. Now in the health manager we have health pickups, right? So let's, we want to do this. So over here, now that we've sent this event, let's get owner on this guy, on our health guy, but not, it doesn't need to be a global, this one. We're just going to use a variable called, I'm just going to call it self. We're just going to get our self. And then I want to array list add, and I'm going to add ourselves, to make sure it's at the bottom, to an object which we know is the health manager, and we know the health manager has an array called health pickups, and it's going to be a type game object, and we're going to add our self to that. And then I'm going to deactivate self so that I don't exist anymore. It's just he's gone. Okay? So this guy here, let's prefab him. I'm going to take this little guy and I'm going to just drag him into one of my folders here. I'll put him in the first folder. Right? So now I can take more of these, like this pickup. I'm going to stick him down. He's like on the ground. I'm going to duplicate him. You know, I'm going to grab one of these guys. I'm going to put him over here and this guy over here. Cool. There we go. Now, what does it mean when this thing gets something added to it? I want to enable the events, right? And we're going to create a new event, right? So this enable events, right? I'm going to copy that and paste him here. What that does is if something in this guy changes with this turned on, he's going to fire off event. So if something adds, he's going to fire off this event, right? So what I will do is we want some sort of timer, and we want to take that object and after a certain time reactivate it. Then there's probably a lot of easier ways to do this, but like I said, this is going to help with demonstrating the communication going to several objects. Okay, so we've added an object. Now that we've added an object, I'm actually going to make another array list, and this one's going to be our timer, and he's going to be he'll be a float. Okay, so we've added an object. So that also means I'm now going to array list add to the timer. It's going to be a float, and we're going to add 10 seconds, we'll say. All right, so now that we've added, let's now make another state here where array list length count is the count. So we're going to go into this guy, and we're going to get how many objects are in there. And if the object is, if there's more than one object, let's count down. And by countdown, all I'm going to do is going to go array list get next, and I'm going to run through the entire list of the timers, and we need a done event type. We know the timers is that, so we have current time. Right, so now we're setting up a nice little array. We're going to go everything here. We should probably keep the index so we know what index we're at. So when we loop, we are going to float subtract. And how much should we subtract? We're dealing with time, so let's get time. More importantly, let's get the delta time. The delta time is the time in between frames. How long is the delay between frames? So if you're running at 60 frames per second, no, actually, okay, to make math, okay, say you're running at 10 frames per second, the delta time would be 0.1. If you're running at 100 frames per second, the delta time would be 0.01, right? So time dot delta time. So we've gotten our time. We're going to loop through. We're going to subtract the current time. We're going to subtract time dot delta time off of every object that's in here. Okay. Now we're going to float compare. Actually, no. You know what? Let's just keep this clean for now. Let's just go back and forth like that. So we've subtracted all the time, and then you know what? And you could do this in one array, but I'm going to do it in two, just so I don't confuse you guys too much. So now that I've subtracted all that time, I'm going to redo the array again. Only this time I'm going to float compare. Okay, and if the current time is 0 or less than 0, usually with floats, a solid straight number is not a good idea. Right? So, okay, if it's above 0, don't worry about it, but if it's below 0, then we want to array list remove at, and we want to remove from this guy and from this guy, the timer one, we're going to take them both away, and we're going to go at the index that we're currently looking at, which is stored right here, right? And then we can go back here. Now when he's done, we're going to come along here, because this whole thing happens in one frame, right? Now we want to say, okay, we've done our frame. Let's hold down Control and click. We get a nice finished event, and I'm just going to go back up, right? So what happens if we're equal to 0? Well, let's add a skip account here, and let's go over here, because there's no point continuing running this array if there's nothing in here, right? So this guy, we're going to come down here. We've added him like that. So let's just give this a little test. All right, let's take our little player. Let's run over one of these boxes. So he disappeared. Let's pause this as this array is running, right? So as you can see, this time is dropping, and I'm forgot one step, so this is going to go on forever, because we're getting the time, and we get the current time that's in there, and we're subtracting it, but we're not putting it back into the array, right? We've pulled it out of the array, we've modified it, now we need to set it back into the array, right? So we're going to go to the timer, and this is going to be at that same index, because we're getting the index here, right? So we know where it's at. And it's going to be a float, and we're just going to re-put in the current time, right? Because we've subtracted that time to it. Right, so now if we hit play again, we drive over and we collect one of these. Now you can see it's got its timer, and it's going down. It's going to count for 10 seconds, right? And when it hits it, it says, okay, we're empty. And if you look, there's nothing left in the arrays. They are empty, right? So, perfect. So this also means, what do we want to do when this timer runs out? We want to activate. We're going to activate, and we want to do this prior to removing it. We want to, okay, so first we have to get it. Array list get. Right, so we're going to get from the health pickups at the index. The result is current health object. Let's activate current health object, and then we can remove the current health object and all that fun stuff, and life continues on. Right, so now we can see that this way. So these health objects are now feeding into an array, and the array is watching them, timing them, and then it's going to put them back. There's one, and there's two, right? Just like that. Perfect. So that's one side. Now let's make sure let's go over to our health, right? I'm going to click on the health and stick it down here so we can see it out here. So if I collect one of these things, we now have 2 health, and that's because we got the event value of 2, we've added it to our health, we've clamped it so we won't go over 5, right? And that one's coming from this guy that already triggered once. So he set the value and sent it to the object that hit him. Right, so I can collect him again now, and we can see the player is at 4, and I can collect this one. We've gone to 5 because we've clamped it, so it can't go to 6. Right? Now, if we wanted to, we could have it so these things check to see if we're full health, and if it is, to just ignore this whole thing. All right, so fair enough. Now let's add an empty. And I'm going to stick it here. And we're going to call this one the muzzle. And I apparently put a slash into that because that's just the way I do things. And I'm going to create a sphere. See how that sphere is size-wise. And we'll cut it down just a little bit. And then let's you know what? Let's make another material for it. We'll call it bullet. And let's stick that here and make it a let's go white and give it an emission of yellow. Right? And you know, just to make that look even cooler, let's go over to our camera. Do I have post-processing? Let's see. Helps. I can't spell today. I swear I can't do it. Okay, I'm going to add a layer and a volume. You don't need to add the volume on the same object, but I'm going to on this anyways. So let's, you know, have a camera layer, right? There's going to be a layer for the camera. Let's make sure the camera's actually on that layer, and let's add a new profile. There we have. There's our profile, and let's add bloom. And you know, let's even add maybe some color grading. So bloom, bring this down, crank that up, 0.7, and let's get into a nice color. I just like having these colors. See if we can get that looking nice. Oh, it's better. I think it is. I could be wrong. I doubt it. Alright, so let's turn on, let's get some ambient occlusion happening. We don't need much, let's just put a little bit on there. Alright, so bullet wise, let's bring his intensity down a little bit. Alright, so this one's a bullet. Now, on the bullet, let's put on a rigid body. Let's make it continuous dynamic. That's going to be important for what we're going to do here. And let's add an FSM. And we are going to have a collision event. And on the collision event, we're going to collide with anything. Well, no. Yeah. Sure, whatever. We'll collide with things. We can define layers in the physics, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So we're going to send damage. If we've collided with something, again, same idea. Store the collider, the object hit. We can also store force too if we wanted to. I'm not going to worry about that. So what are we going to do? It's going to be just like the heel. Set event properties. Right? And I think I used okay, let's do 1 and send event. You know, maybe have some bullets that do 2, or a landmine maybe does 3. and we want to hit that same thing. So if I grab that player and go health and say damage, swap this over to the object, there we go. Now let's destroy self. Move him to the bottom. And there we have it. Now we have a bullet. So let's prefab the bullet. Ba-doop. And let's just double check that that is what our health does. Value integer. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now, that also means we need an FSM for the gun. So what if we have get key down? And we'll use space. And that's a shoot. So we can shoot. Now we can do this numerous ways. We can fire a shot every time at the key. We can do a holding thing. Probably just, I think I'm just going to fire one shot. Oops. Well, let's create an object. And we're going to create the bullet. I don't care about the parent, but I do care about the muzzle. We want to create it at the muzzle, and we're going to store this thing. And then I want to add, actually no, you know what, I'm going to set velocity. And we're going to set velocity of the bullet, self space, we'll say 50. That should be pretty fast. Alright, so let's see what happens. Oh. Alright, so I think we have the muzzle possibly a little too close. There we go. Alright, so let's get into the player a bit here and speed that up. 75. Let's go 100, and you know what, I'm going to give it just a tiny bit of Y, just a tiny touch, so it travels a little farther. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to come out of play mode. 100 and, you know, no, I'm just going to go 0.5, just a little bit. Just a little bit. I don't want traveling too far. I don't want to overshoot anything. Now, with that said, I mean, I always could go into here and freeze its Y position, right? We could do that, and then it's not going to drop at all. It just can't. There is no dropping. But then the bolt's going to travel forever, and we're going to have issues. So if we do that, we should also do this. Destroy self, and give it a timer. 3 seconds. Alright, so let's duplicate our player, call him an enemy, and we will get rid of the move because we don't need him moving. I won't bother building. I was debating on building the AI so he can drive around. We could have a little tank battle, but I won't worry about that, I don't think. Take a little too much time. So I'm going to just go over and let's get into my health here because I forgot to do that. Because the health is 0, right? We don't want that. And if I take the enemy, let's just notice how his health is still 0, obviously, because the way he works. Now, if he hits this, his health also goes up, right? Perfect. So as a player, oh, I forgot about that. We need to get rid of the gun. he is also shooting. And I forgot to move this out. So let's just move that out. There we go. Right, so there, now we're hitting him. If I go to the enemy, we're getting the value. It's got 3 health, 2 health, 1 health, gone. Right? So there we have some ways to communicate. So not only did we create a new object and we shoot it, so we have to create it, store it as a reference so that we can shoot it. We've got this health pickup, which feeds into a manager. The manager just respawns everything. So we got some communication there. We're playing with arrays. We have health and damage logic happening. You know, a little bit of firing. So hopefully, especially if you're new, this is kind of geared more towards the new players or new users of Playmaker. Hopefully something like this helps you out, dealing with the communication and some of the things in Playmaker. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later.